On the bench today, we have one of Boss's oldest schematics, the DS-1, completely analog, and we're going to compare that to one of their new digital pedals, the Plugout FX or PX-1. This is purely analog, and this is a digital emulation of this somewhere in time. So before we get into what the analysis is going to be, please like and subscribe because subscriptions drive the channel. Okay, let's compare the two pedals. Let's take a look at the Electrosmash website because this is going to be our reference, link below to this website. This is the DS-1, 1978-1979-ish. Gone through about 3 significant revisions, and one of them, the main one, is the replacement of this chip in the 80s, and so that created some circuit redesign. And the only thing in common that mine has with the original is it's got a silver screw on the front. Let's take a look at the schematic, and there's about 5 major parts, but the parts that count are here. So this is the op amp, and this is the gain stage of the op amp controlled by this pot here, and then it's a hard clipper. So this is what really creates the distortion. Well, it's a combination of this thing beginning to clip out and these then really clipping. And then like a little cap here to smooth it out. And then the other contribution, and there's a link above, is the tone stack. So that's like it's a mid-scoop tone stack, and it's got 2 halves. It's got a low frequency part and a high frequency part. May have got them the wrong way around, but it really emphasizes highs and lows and doesn't emphasize the mid around 1 kilohertz. Those are the 2 main components. Let's now compare that to the Plugout. So this is the digital Plugout FX. Essentially, it's got an input circuit, analog probably, then an analog to digital converter to get it into digital, a DSP system, digital signal processing system, then a digital to analog converter, and out it goes. And within the DSP is where all the magic happens. We're going to compare the two, both in terms of tone, but we're also going to look at them electrically. And I'm also interested in the input circuitry as well, and how well does that respond to a boost in front of it? How does that change the harmonic performance of this pedal? Okay, let's do a quick tone test and see what they sound like alongside each other. I've got the pedals hooked up, clean sound. So let's plug our reference in. So we're on a bridge pickup, it's humbuckers. So reference DS-1. Over to the Plugout. Seems like the Plugout is a little more mid-focused. Quite interesting. So there's a couple of things going on here that we need to understand. This is a brand new DS-1, and this is emulating an original DS-1, like 1978 year or whatever, 79, 78. Things change over time, so there's been a number of schematic reviews. The op-amp's been changed on this a couple of times, and then as pedals get older, the values actually change in the pedals, especially capacitors. That's going to change the tone of a pedal over time, and that's why a lot of people like older sounding stuff, because the tones slightly change because of the component drift. Why don't we get a SIGGEN hooked up to these things and actually look at the signals in the time domain and see if there's a great deal of difference? And if there is a difference, is it subtle or is it completely different? I've now hooked up a signal generator to the pedals, and I'm looking at the output on an oscilloscope. So we're using 1 kilohertz standard test wave, about 800 millivolts, good humbucker sound, or a good humbucker level, I should say. Both the pedals are off right now, so on the oscilloscope you can see the sine wave. So now if I turn on the original, the analog DS-1, that's what a distorted waveform at 1 kilohertz looks like for the settings that we had earlier in the tone test. But let's switch this guy off. Let's zoom in. So now we're looking at that edge there in the center of the screen. The pedal's off, on, so look at that little bump, and then look at it on the analog version. It's much smoother, and we can turn up the tone and the volume, check our pop tolerances. It's very smooth still, a bit more amplitude. And then we get a bit more edge by just moving the tone. So as we move it up, emphasizing higher frequencies. And then go back to the digital one. Yeah, it's a different signal. This is very smooth. And this is like a bump, then down, and then a gradual increase in the signal's amplitude. So let's change frequencies. So if we go down in frequency now, it's almost the same. It's almost the same bump. Like they're going up in frequency. You can see the waveform's getting smaller, but that bump remains the same. So it's almost like it's the same mathematical equation or the same modeling equation or function that's applied at every frequency. Now let's put on our analog distortion. And so now we see the smooth again. That's at 1.4 kilohertz. So let me take it down. You see now the bump's gone at 300 hertz, where we went all the way down to 200 hertz and still saw a bump on the digital one. So this one has, and then it gets quite flat there. So let's just compare these two at this frequency. Yeah, it's kind of trying to emulate the same thing, like it's the same function at every single frequency. Where this one now has a bump and then a graceful, almost logarithmic decay on the top of the waveform there, and then switches off as the sine wave goes into the negative cycle. Very interesting indeed. That the analog one is actually more frequency dependent, i.e. the tone changes or the distortion changes or the characteristics of the distortion changes as you go over frequency. Where in the digital emulation, feels like it's the same algorithm multiplied against the waveform at every single frequency. That's at 2.4 kilohertz. So switch it off, switch it on. Yeah, it's just completely different. I want to look at it in the frequency domain, so why don't we hook up our FFT algorithm to this waveform and have a look at the harmonic response. So we've got the frequency domain measurement and spectrum analyzer hooked up now. So this is the waveform that comes from the scope. We have a 1 kilohertz tone here. This is 10 kilohertz here, and then this is 0 hertz down here. Let's put on the digital guy first. With this setting, and this setting we've been using all along, we're generating a harmonic set. And you can see it's quite a beautiful harmonic set. The first harmonic's low, then a high one, then a low one, and then it tails off in this kind of shape. So why don't we look at the analog one and see what kind of harmonic set that produces? Okay, very different. Lots more harmonics, dirtier. It doesn't follow the first shape. The dominant harmonic in the analog one is the first harmonic, where that was attenuated in the digital one. Let's go back to it. Let the averaging work itself out. And then you see that's smaller than that one. So the second harmonic is emphasized and the first harmonic is attenuated. You have the roll off here, which is interesting, which is kind of the same. But then we've got all these subharmonics, thousands of them, and this is fizz essentially. So this one's a little more fizzier, and this one is tighter and more mid-focused. I like it. It's a different pedal though. While we've got the pedals hooked up to the spectrum analyzer, why don't we see how they perform when we add a boost in front of them and see if there's a behavior change? And we'll do that with both the spectrum analyzer and then we'll do it with an actual tone test. Now I've put the boost in, feedback booster. Might as well stay with the Boss theme. And so let's switch this guy on and have a look at our core harmonic set from just the boost. Clean boost. It's pretty evenly spaced out. First harmonic, second, third, fourth is really small. Second harmonic, the harmonic at 2 kilohertz is quite high, and then 3 and 4 are about the same. Now let's put on our DS-1. This is off, and let's look at the first harmonic, second harmonic, third harmonic, and fourth here, and put the distortion on and see what happens. So the first harmonic gets big. It's almost as big as the fundamental, and this one shrank, and these guys got a little bigger. Now let's turn them both off. Switch this guy on. Okay, so now here's our harmonic performance. Notice a lot of the fizz is gone. It's just pure harmonics. And then let's turn this guy on. And it doesn't change much, I don't think. I have averaging on, so it takes a time for it to change. But the first harmonic does increase, but not to the same amplitude. So its response to boost is completely different to the analog response to boost as well. But so let's tone test these out now and see if we can hear an audible difference. Now we know what's going on under the hood. I've got the pedals all hooked up now, so we've got a boost feeding these two guys. Clean sound. Put on the boost. So the boost is emphasizing higher frequencies. Cutting bass. Let's switch on the DS-1. Off. That's good. So we're both emphasizing or amplifying the highs created by this, but then we've got a lot of harmonic mix going on between the two pedals. Now let's switch this guy off. Plug this guy back in. And then let's add some boost. Well, it's much more controlled. We're not seeing so much, I would say, in terms of harmonic addition, especially all the mess of harmonics that this guy creates and this guy creates at the higher frequencies. But truly, the algorithm is amplifying the higher frequencies in a DS-1 manner. Well, that's very interesting. So let's conclude. This is a Boss DS-1. It was purchased in 2025 from Guitar Center. That's why it's a special. This is a Plugout FX PX-1 that's emulating a 1978 Boss DS-1. Now, I've looked at a few YouTubes to try and work out, is it a massive tone difference between the distortion from the DS-1 2025? It feels subtle. And then what we did was we looked at it on the spectrum analyzer and the oscilloscope and noticed that the waveform behavior is different. So I would say that this one is not frequency dependent. It applies the same model to all the different frequencies. So when we wound the frequencies up and down, there was not much of a change in the waveform, whether it was 300 hertz or whether it was 3 kilohertz. Now this one, when we change the frequency, the waveform changes, so it has frequency dependence. So that's a big difference. And then when we add in the boost, all hell gets let loose because the harmonics here and the harmonics here really multiply together. And this has a lot of harmonics, many more harmonics than this guy, and it's a lot more fizzier. Now, was the original a lot more fizzier? That's something that we need to test in the future. But when I apply this guy to here, this faithfully adds a DS-1 algorithm to whatever comes out of here. So it really doesn't matter what goes in here. It adds the harmonics. So there's a little bit of an input stage, I bet. But overall, we had this with bass cut, emphasized on the mids. What this did was apply the DS-1 algorithm to that. They're all different beasts. I like this. It's quite good. It's very controlled. Let's do it again. Clean. Bang it on. Very nice. And you can hear there's miles more harmonics in this one, a lot more fizz. And then when we put this guy in, it's making the sound of this into a DS-1 style sound. And when we do it here, we just get loads more harmonics. Well, that's it. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.